Hare Krishna devotees, welcome to our last day of the Women's Day special program. We've completed the 5 topics of the Bhagavad Gita, and we've given you a very high-level introduction that perhaps does not do much justice to what the Bhagavad Gita actually contains. And over the last 8 sessions, we've also discovered many women who are great devotees of the Lord. And how many lessons and guidance we can get for them for ourselves. These were no ordinary women. And today we're going to touch the topic of the gopis of Vrindavan, their exquisite love for the Lord, their selfless devotion to the Lord, and the interactions between the Lord and the gopis are played out in a few chapters, actually 4 chapters in Srimad Bhagavatam, chapters 29, 30, 31, and 32 of Canto 10. This is not an easy topic to discuss. This is considered to be one of the most confidential topics. The highest rasa. We mentioned that the Jivatma has, actually each one of us is eternally connected to Krishna in any one of the 5 rasas. Of course, we'll discover which rasa we are attracted to Krishna in when we actually go back to the spiritual world. We will understand our spiritual position and the rasa in which we actually enjoy the Supreme Lord. But our acharyas say each one of us is eternally in one of the 5 rasas. We mentioned in an earlier class that the 5 rasas are Shantaras, where you worship the Lord with neutrality. You accept him as the Supreme Lord, but you may not have developed any love and affection for him. Perhaps you worship him because you're told to. Then from the Shantaras, you move to Dasyaras, which is you are in the mood of serving the Lord as a servant, as exemplified by Hanumanji. And then you come to the mood of Arjuna and all the Gopa boys in Vrindavan, where they are serving the Lord in the mood of friendship. Then you come to Mother Yashoda and Nanda Maharaj, who are serving the Lord in Vatsalya Ras. They see their Lord as a little child who needs to be taken care of, who needs to be protected, who needs to be chastised sometimes. And today, we're going to come to the rasa, which is the highest of all rasas, which is called the Madhurya Ras. The Madhurya Ras means you see the Lord as your lover. And this is exemplified by the gopis. And the most perfect of gopis is Srimati Radharani. So Srila Prabhupada actually warns us that none of us should get into the Rasa Leela topic without first understanding who the Supreme Lord is. Because if you come to this topic without understanding who the Supreme Lord is, you will walk away with a lot of misconceptions. But nevertheless, because we are talking about great women, we felt it would be right to briefly talk about the gopis' love for Krishna, and maybe also along the way get a proper understanding of this philosophy of Madhurya Rasa, so that you walk away from today's session with full respect and admiration for the gopis, and more so for Srimati Radharani. Actually, Srimati Radharani is not mentioned by name in Srimad Bhagavatam at all. She is just referred to as that topmost gopi. And the reason for that, Acharyas explain why Srimati Radharani's name is not mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam. Is because the narrator of Srimad Bhagavatam, Shukadev Goswami, is her personal parrot. In the spiritual world, he is her personal parrot. And because he had only 7 days to narrate the Bhagavatam to Parikshit Maharaj, if he starts talking about his mistress, he may get completely digressed. And he may go into an ecstasy thinking about Srimati Radharani. Therefore, her name is not mentioned by Shukadev Goswami. We also mentioned in the first session that ontologically, in the spiritual world, all the souls are female, and there is only one soul that is male, and that is Purusha, the Parama Purusha, that is Krishna. So the souls may occupy different types of bodies, a male body or a female body. But from a spiritual angle, all souls are female. So it's only natural that all souls that are female are attracted to the one soul that is male or Purusha. The word Purusha means enjoyer. And the Jivatmas are meant to be enjoyed by the Lord. So, in one of the previous chapters, which we are not going to cover today, the Lord was perhaps 5 or 6 years old, probably five and a half years old. And the gopis keep a vrat for 30 days because all of them secretly want Krishna as their husband. So they worship Mother Katyayani to get this benediction. Very faithfully, they would eat only Havishya Anna every day. It's a special fasting food for 30 days. And on the last day of their vrat, the Lord comes and steals their garments. And they have to beg the Lord to get their garments back. Even that Leela is a little difficult to understand. When the Lord tells them in that Leela, I know exactly, they never express to the Lord that they wanted him as their husband. But the Lord says, I know exactly what you're thinking. I know what you were praying for. And he says, I will fulfill your prayer very soon. Now, technically speaking, the Lord never marries the gopis. But that's what they wanted. But how the Lord fulfills their desire to have him as their husband is actually depicted in the Rasa dance, the Rasa Leela. And that way the Lord satisfied and fulfilled their desire without actually, from a material standpoint, getting married to them. Later on, we know that Lord Krishna, after he moves out of Vrindavan, marries 16,108 wives, and he lives with them in Dwaraka. So the mood of the queens and their love for Krishna as the king in Dwaraka is very different than the mood of the gopis in Vrindavan. So the acharyas explain that the queens were actually in predominantly Aishwarya ras and a little bit of Madhurya ras. Aishwarya ras means your husband is your master, and they treated Krishna as their master and husband, but with full respect and veneration. And the gopis were only in Madhurya ras. No contamination. I should not use the word contamination, but I don't know what other word to use. Only pure love. No reverence. You will see that today when the gopis argue with Krishna. On the one hand, they seem to know he's the Supreme Lord. On the other hand, they just think, you are our beloved. So there's no formality. Whereas between the queens and Krishna, there was some formality. Here, there is no formality. So Krishna had promised them during the Vastraharan Leela that he would fulfill their desire. He didn't tell them that he knew what their desire was. He simply said, I will fulfill your desire. I know exactly what you prayed for. But I will fulfill your desire because you've been so faithfully keeping your vrat. So this is chapter 29 of Canto 10, and we'll come to the shlokas shortly. So what does the Lord do? He remembers the promise that he has made the gopis when he stole their clothes. So he decided in the dark of the night to play his flute to attract the gopis to come to him. The acharyas say the Lord would play different notes to call for different sets of his devotees. For the cows and calves, he had one particular note. For the cowherd boys, he had another particular note. For the gopis, he had one more note. So if you just play that note, they knew they were supposed to go and meet him. So it's late at night, and the Lord plays his flute. And what happens to the gopis is that when they hear the flute sound, immediately they put down all of their householder responsibilities. So some were feeding their child, some were serving their husbands, some were preparing food items, some were putting their babies to sleep. So every single young gopi was already married. So they were engaged in so many different householder activities, but the minute they heard the flute, just like the Brahmana's wives, when they heard the name Krishna and Balaram, they didn't think twice. They just left. And that's what the gopis did. And the husbands and family members tried to stop the young girls from going. But they didn't take heed. They just left anyway. Shukadev Goswami explains, when the gopis left, their material bodies stayed in the house. Their spiritual bodies went to meet Krishna. This is how they deceived their relatives. and went off to meet Krishna. It is unheard of for women to leave their houses in the dark of the night. It was not considered safe. So finally, the gopis come before the Lord. And the Lord asks them, "Why have you come? It's not good for you to travel in the dead of night like this. Don't you know the forest is full of violent creatures? Your husbands, your children, they're going to be searching for you. And once they find you, they're going to take you back to make sure you engage yourself in householder responsibilities." And the Lord tells them, "Isn't the primary duty of a religious woman to serve her husband and children? Isn't that her predominant responsibility? That's her dharma." And then the Lord says, any respectable woman who's married, she'll certainly not step out of the house to have a lover. If she does have a lover, she's going to be blocked in her spiritual progress. So Krishna played the flute and called them. And immediately Krishna is chastising them, saying, "Why have you come? How could you leave your husbands and children behind? You're not acting like a very respectable woman, that too in the middle of the night coming to meet your lover." And as if to console them, Krishna says, just as he had said to the Brahmana's wives, one develops pure love for me, not by physical proximity, but by hearing topics connected with me, by viewing my deity form in the temple, by meditating upon me, and by faithfully chanting my glories. So Krishna is saying, I know you've fallen in love with me, but just because you've fallen in love with me doesn't mean you have to spend time with me physically. The best way to increase your love for me is to hear about me, is to chant about me, to worship me in the temple, and always think about me. And do this faithfully. And then Krishna says, therefore, it is best that all of you return home. Like this, Krishna simply broke their hearts. The young gopis were so dejected, they started crying. And at the same time, they were angry with Krishna. And we're going to come to the shlokas where they exhibit their anger to the Lord. So let's come to shloka number 31. So the gopis began to speak. They heard the Lord patiently, but now they were angry. So the beautiful gopi said, "O all-powerful one, you should not speak in this cruel way. Do not reject us who have renounced all material enjoyment to render devotional service to your lotus feet. Reciprocate with us, O stubborn one. Just as the primeval Lord Sri Narayana reciprocates with his devotees in their endeavors for liberation." The gopis don't know that the Lord himself is also Lord Narayana. Later on in this pastime, when the Lord disappears from their midst, they are searching for him everywhere in the middle of the night, trying to figure out where are his footprints, where did the Lord go? And suddenly, Lord Krishna comes in front of them and becomes four-handed Narayana. And the gopis are not at all impressed by Lord Narayana. They just look at him and say, "Have you seen our Krishna? Can you tell us where he is?" They didn't recognize Krishna in his four-handed form. And so the Narayana, with his four arms, would point in four different directions and say, "Krishna went this way." And the gopis would just scatter. And the Lord was enjoying this. that they didn't recognize him. So the gopis are saying, you are supposed to reciprocate with us. Why are you being so stubborn? What have we done? We've abandoned our families to come to you. And you are just asking us to go back. You're rejecting us. Dear Krishna, as an expert in religion, you have advised us that the proper religious duty for women is to faithfully serve their husbands, children, and other relatives. We agree that this principle is valid, but actually the service should be rendered to you. After all, O Lord, you are the dearmost friend of all embodied souls. You are their most intimate relative and indeed their very self. So the gopis are saying, we agree with you. Yes, dharmically speaking, we are in women's bodies. We are supposed to take care of our husbands and family and render service. But wouldn't you agree from a spiritual perspective, all of us should serve you first? We should have you in the center of our household. Why should we do this? Because we have an intimate connection with you. You are our most intimate relative. And now they're backing up their argument with Krishna by saying, even other yogis, those who are practicing bhakti yoga, they are doing it because they know that you are the ultimate object of love for all of the jiva. So they say expert transcendentalists always direct their affection toward you because they recognize you as their true self and eternal beloved. What use do we have for these husbands, children, and relatives of ours who simply give us trouble? So they're telling Krishna, what's the point? After meeting you, what's the point of going back to husband, children, relative? All they give us is trouble. Trouble means in what way? Once you become attached to Krishna, you still have to pretend that you love your husband, you love your children, and you have to serve them very nicely. But that's what Krishna expects you to do. But they're arguing. Isn't this grihastha life full of problems? Because grihastha life means so many responsibilities for the husband, for the mother, for the wife. And every single responsibility that we undertake as grihasthas means it's taking us away from Krishna. We become preoccupied with our bodily duties and responsibilities, and very slowly we'll forget Krishna. So that's why they are saying, aren't family members actually trouble? In the sense, grihastha life is the most tough life. It's tough to perform bhakti yoga when you are a grihastha. Because in spite of having so many duties and responsibilities, you have to find time for Krishna. Therefore, O Supreme Controller, grant us your mercy. O lotus-eyed one, please do not cut down our long-cherished hope to have your association. The gopis are saying, full daytime you are with the Gopa boys. Do you know how her heart is longing for you? So when do we get the opportunity to serve? Except during the night hours. So don't reject us like this. Until today, our minds were absorbed in household affairs. But you easily stole both our minds and our hands away from our housework. So the minute you played that flute, our mind gravitated towards you and our hand dropped all responsibilities of householdership. You stole it both. Not only that, now our feet won't move one step from your lotus feet. They're saying we are fixated here. We can't move. How can we go back to Vraja? What would we do there? The Lord has told them already what they have to do. They have to go back and do their duties and responsibilities. But now they're saying, exactly what do you want us to do by going back? Dear Krishna, please pour the nectar of your lips upon the fire within our hearts, a fire you ignited with your smiling glances and the sweet song of your flute. They're saying, don't blame us for falling in love with you. You are so attractive. You're so beautiful. You speak so sweetly. And then they're threatening Krishna. If you do not, we will consign our bodies to the fire of separation from you, O friend, and thus, like yogis, attain to the abode of your lotus feet by meditation. So you see, in Madhurya Ras, there is no reverence for the Lord. There is just deep intimacy between the gopis and Krishna. So they're telling Krishna, if you don't fulfill our desires, do you know what we will do? We will just sit here, meditate on your lotus feet, and we'll enter the spiritual world. O lotus-eyed one, the goddess of fortune considers it a festive occasion. Whenever she touches the soles of your lotus feet, the gopis are saying, every time Lakshmi Devi has the opportunity to touch your lotus feet as Narayana, for her it is like a big festival, it's a huge celebration, because such an opportunity is so rare. You are very dear to the residents of the forest, and therefore we will also touch those lotus feet. From that time on, we will be unable even to stand in the presence of any other man, for we will have been fully satisfied by him. The gopis are saying, what's the point? Now we have seen your lotus feet, we've had an opportunity to associate with you. Our attraction for any other man has been extinguished. Lakshmi Devi, whose glance is sought after by the demigods with great endeavor, has achieved the unique position of always remaining on the chest of her Lord, Narayana. Still, she desires the dust of his lotus feet, even though she has to share that dust with Tulsi Devi and indeed with the Lord's many other servants. So the gopis are saying, the great devatas are hankering for the merciful glance of Lakshmi Devi. But Lakshmi Devi herself is hankering for the dust of your lotus feet. And to that lotus feet, she doesn't have exclusive property, exclusive rights, because Tulsi Devi is always at the lotus feet of the Lord. What to speak of Tulsi Devi? All the pure devotees of the Lord are always like bees hanging around his lotus feet. So the gopis say, we have also done the same thing. We've taken shelter of your lotus feet. Therefore, O vanquisher of all distress, please show us mercy. To approach your lotus feet, we abandoned our families and homes, and we have no desire other than to serve you. Our hearts are burning with intense desires generated by your beautiful smiling glances. O jewel among men, please make us your maid servants. So the gopis are begging the Lord, accept us as your maid servants. It's too late. It's too late for us. We can't turn the clock back. We've already abandoned everything and surrendered ourselves to you. So please don't disappoint us. So like this, the gopis are speaking to Krishna, telling him it is his responsibility to reciprocate with them. And so the Lord takes all the gopis to the banks of the river Yamuna. A cool wind was blowing. Everybody could smell the fragrances of the lotuses. And there the Lord expanded himself into millions of Krishna for the millions of gopis that were there, so that he could personally dance with each one of them. So the Lord was very playful with them, joking with them, laughing with them, embracing them. Like this, the acharyas say, there were millions of gopis, not 1, 2, 10, a dozen, millions of them. And as the Lord was benedicting them with what they had asked, you see, when Krishna was associating with the gopis, it was as if a lover was associating with a beloved. And therefore, through this dance, Krishna satisfied their desire that they had of him to become their husband, simply through this rasa dance. But then something happened. Each of the gopis thought, wow, I must be really special, that Krishna is dancing with me. I must be the best devotee. I must be the best woman on earth. The minute that thought crept into their head, Keshava just abandons them. Why? You cannot have a tinge of pride when you're serving the Lord. So the Lord, seeing that they were too proud of their good fortune, he wanted to teach them out of his mercy, out of his love. So immediately he disappears. Now you can imagine the condition of the gopis. First Krishna said, go back. Now Krishna has fulfilled their desire. Now suddenly he's just disappeared. He's vanished. And they begin searching for the Lord. And they are searching. Along the way, they ask different creatures, have you seen our Krishna? Have you seen our Krishna? And suddenly they see 2 footprints side by side. And they were thinking, that definitely must be that topmost gopi whose worship for Krishna is so perfect, who's super excellent in her services to Krishna, that the Lord decided to spend time with her and her alone in seclusion. And then suddenly they could no longer see Radharani's footprints. And they concluded, Krishna must have carried Radharani on his shoulders. See, the footprints in this place is deeper. That means Krishna was holding some weight. So sometimes they would see only the toes of Krishna on the sand. And they would think, ah yes, Krishna is picking up some flowers and decorating Radharani's hair. So like this, they were imagining what was transpiring between Radharani and Krishna. and they were experiencing great pain because Krishna had abandoned them. And then Srimati Radharani thinks, I'm the most fortunate of all the gopis. And she tells the Lord, I can no longer walk. Please carry me. And the Lord said, sure, just climb onto my shoulders. The minute he said, climb onto my shoulders, he also disappeared. So the Lord first disappears from the midst of all the other gopis. And then finally, he also disappears from Srimati Radharani's presence. So now he's betrayed, so-called betrayed. The Lord never really betrays, right? Everything he does is for our spiritual progress. So we're going to come to the 30th chapter where the Lord has disappeared. And we're just going to read a couple of shlokas to, again, witness the mood. Yes, I hope you can see my slides. Sorry, the base. So we'll go to shloka 28 and 29. So the gopis are searching. And as they're searching, they are recognizing, you can see here, the marks of a flag, a lotus, thunderbolt, elephant goat, barley corn, and so forth on these footprints clearly distinguish them as belonging to that great soul, the son of Nanda Maharaj. So they were great detectives. They knew how to spot the Lord just by looking at his lotus foot imprints on the sands of Rajabhumi. So here we come. They have spotted the footprints of Srimati Radharani. These footprints of that special gopi greatly disturb us. Of all the gopis, she alone was taken away to a secluded place where she is enjoying the lips of Krishna. Look, we can't see her footprints over here. It's obvious that the grass and sprouts were hurting the tender soles of her feet, and so the lover lifted up his beloved. Please observe, my dear gopis, how in this place lusty Krishna's footprints are pressed more deeply into the ground. Carrying the weight of his beloved must have been difficult for him. And over here, that intelligent boy must have put her down to gather some flowers. Keep in mind, from a material perspective, Krishna's age he's just 9 years old. So the gopis would have been this similar age to him. Just see how in this place dear Krishna collected flowers for his beloved. Here he has left the impression of only the front part of his feet because he was standing on his toes to reach the flowers. So like this, the gopis are imagining what all is happening between Radharani and Krishna. And finally, Srimati Radharani is also abandoned. And Radharani meets with the other gopis. So in Shloka 41, she's telling them how Madhava had given her much respect, but how she then suffered dishonor because of her misbehavior. The gopis were extremely amazed to hear this. So now, along with Radharani, they continue to search for the Lord. Which brings us to the next chapter, which is chapter 31. In chapter 31, which is called the Gopi Gita, they are feeling intense separation from the Lord. And they are singing the various pastimes of the Lord. And this Gopi Geet is venerated by many, many acharyas as the topmost expression of devotion for the Lord. So here we're going to come to Shlokas 16 and 17. Sorry, I had to make notes because some of these chapters are quite long. So let me share my screen again for chapter 31. So we will go to 16 and 17 to see what is the mood of the gopis. They are accusing the Lord of doing all kinds of things. The Lord is not there with them, but they're talking to him like as if he was there. So look at Shloka 16. The gopis are saying, "Dear Achyuta, you know very well why we have come here. Who but a cheater like you would abandon young women who come to see him in the middle of the night, enchanted by the loud song of his flute?" So you see, the gopis are expressing their impudence. They're calling the Lord a cheater. Just to see you, we have completely rejected our husbands, children, ancestors, brothers, and other relatives. You are the greatest cheater, Krishna. Our minds are repeatedly bewildered as we think of the intimate conversations we had with you in secret. Feel the rise of lust in our hearts and remember your smiling face, your loving glances, and your broad chest, the resting place of the goddess of fortune. Thus we experience the most severe hankering for you. So they are saying you have abandoned us, but that has just increased our love for you. They are saying we cannot help it. You are the object of our love. There's nobody else who can take your position. So like this, the gopis are now, even in the previous chapter, they enact the pastimes of the Lord. How he killed Putana, how he killed Shakatashura, how he ate mud, how he was defeated in games, how he would complain that he lost. So they seem to be very well versed in all of the childhood pastimes of the Lord, and they would enact it, including lifting the Govardhana hill. So they are consoling themselves by simply enacting the pastimes of the Lord. And when they are enacting the pastimes of the Lord, they are thinking about the Lord. Their mind is completely absorbed in the Lord. You see, even though the Lord abandoned them and they're calling him a cheater, still they can't stop thinking about him. It reminds me of when Krishna is in Dwaraka. He is concerned about the gopis. He sends Uddhava with a letter that he should personally read to the gopis. And he finds them meditating. And he asks them, you must be meditating on Krishna. You must be trying to remember Krishna. You must be missing him so much. And the gopis say, are you mad? We are meditating to forget Krishna. They're saying he has betrayed us. He's left us. He told us he will come back. We are meditating to forget Krishna, but it is impossible to forget him. We are doing our best to forget him. Then suddenly Uddhava realized what great devotees the gopis were. They were meditating to forget Krishna, but they were not successful. Uddhava used to think that he was the greatest devotee of the Lord until he met the gopis. So Lord Krishna accomplished two things at once. He communicated to the gopis through the letter he handwrote and Uddhava reads to them. Simultaneously, Krishna knew that Uddhava thought himself to be an exalted devotee. He was very close to Krishna. So Krishna in his own sweet way had to tell Uddhava, you've not seen devotion until you've seen the Vrajagopis. So imagine how much they are absorbed in Krishna consciousness. They cannot stop thinking about Krishna. And so Krishna comes back into the scene because they were hankering for him so much. He comes back and a beautiful exchange happens. The gopis are suddenly shy when the Lord comes back. They were so angry with him that the minute he comes back, they don't know what to do. So they were just drinking in the Lord's darshan when he comes back. And this particular chapter ends in a beautiful way where the Lord says, we'll come to those shlokas, where the Lord says, you are the most exalted devotees. Nobody else can match the kind of love and affection that you have showered on me. And along the way, the gopis ask an important question. And the Lord clarifies, which you can read a little later on. The gopis ask Krishna, some people reciprocate the affection only of those who are affectionate toward them, while others show affection even to those who are indifferent or inimical. And yet others will not show affection toward anyone. Dear Krishna, please properly explain this matter to us. So they're asking, some people will only express love if others are affectionate towards them. Some people express love for anyone and everyone, even to those who are indifferent to them. And then a third category, they have no love for anybody in their hearts. So they wanted clarity on this. And the Lord tells them the differences between these three different categories of people. And in the last three shlokas of this chapter, the Lord says, but the reason I do not immediately reciprocate the affection of living beings, even when they worship me, O gopis, is that I want to intensify their loving devotion. They then become like a poor man who has gained some wealth and then lost it, and who thus becomes so anxious about it that he can think of nothing else. Krishna is saying, this is how I play the game. The Jivatma becomes attracted to me. He has a natural affection and attraction to me. But when he begins to take those first steps to serve me, I will not immediately reciprocate. Why? Because then he will go mad and he will want to intensify his seva. So Krishna helps you strengthen your spiritual progress towards him. And Krishna makes an astounding statement here. My dear girls, understanding that simply for my sake you had rejected the authority of worldly opinion, of the Vedas, and of your relatives, I acted as I did only to increase your attachment to me. Krishna is saying, those who are ready to abandon everything, their families, they don't care about the opinion of others, they don't care for the Vedic scriptures, they only care for me. I deliberately rejected so that your attachment to me will increase. Krishna says, even when I removed myself from your sight by suddenly disappearing, I never stopped loving you. So Krishna is saying, even if you don't see me, you should continue your service. Just because you don't see me doesn't mean I don't love you. Your duty is to serve me. Therefore, my beloved gopis, please do not harbor any bad feelings toward me, your beloved. So Krishna is telling them, don't be angry with me. Don't be upset with me. Continue to serve me because I am still your beloved. And then Krishna says, I am not able to repay my debt for your spotless service, even within a lifetime of Brahma. Krishna is saying, the kind of love that you have for me, I cannot reciprocate. Remember the gopi said in an earlier chapter, aren't you supposed to reciprocate with us? A lover has to reciprocate. That's how relationships work. Krishna is saying, how can I reciprocate? Your love for me is so overwhelming. I'm incapable of reciprocating with you. Krishna is saying, you are in a more exalted position than me because you have completely conquered me with your love. I don't know how to repay you. He says, your connection with me is beyond reproach. You have worshipped me, cutting off all domestic ties which are difficult to break. Therefore, please let your own glorious deeds be your compensation. Krishna is saying, your love for me is so immense. I cannot do anything that is going to satisfy you. I'm at a loss. So you please be satisfied loving me because I can't repay you. So Krishna is saying, your seva itself is the reward. That's why Srila Prabhupada defines bhakti as devotional service. Devotion doesn't mean inactivity. Devotion means activity, expressing your love and desire for Krishna by serving him in the temple in various capacities. By serving his devotees, you will please him even more. Krishna is saying, you will be most blissful when you're doing this service, thinking of me, because I can never repay you. That is the stature of the gopis. But the Lord himself has said, I don't know what to do with this kind of love. It is uninterrupted. It is unmotivated. You don't ask me for anything. All the gopis want is endless opportunities to serve the Lord. Unending opportunities to serve the Lord. That's what our acharyas say, that the more we are engaged in the service of the Lord is none different than the deities in the temple. And the highest form of service is preaching. The Lord accepts all services from you and me. And through these services, our love for the Lord simply intensifies. But why is preaching the highest form of service? As the Lord says in the Bhagavad Gita, those who are preaching this knowledge are more dear to me than anyone else. Why? Because in preaching, you have to struggle, you have to experience frustration, you have to experience disappointment. You will experience some bliss because you're desperately trying to connect another Jivatma back to Krishna. And therefore, he considers preaching to be the highest form of love and affection for him. Because by preaching, you're not only working for Krishna, You are working on behalf of Krishna. You are doing what Krishna thinks is difficult for him to do, to capture the attention and imagination of the Jivatmas, to coax them to come back to him. So when another Jivatma is coaxing those who are lost to go back to Krishna, Krishna says, how can I repay you? You have brought back another lost child. Of course, the Lord accepts all services. But the Lord has a special place in his heart for those who sacrifice their lives to preach, like our dear Srila Prabhupada, who made so many sacrifices to preach in the Western world, to awaken our consciousness, to let us know that there is a better place for you and me. And we shouldn't waste any more time in this material cosmos. My dear devotees, we cannot imitate the gopis, but we can certainly aspire to follow in their footsteps. If we can even do 0.00001% of what they did for the Lord, then certainly the Lord will come for us. At the end of our life. So maybe we can experience this kind of separation from Krishna. And make it our spiritual goal. Not to waste any more time, but to go back to Krishna in this life. Actually, Prabhupada would say repeatedly, this one life you give to Krishna. In so many other lives, we've ignored him. So we can try our best. And Guru and Krishna will help us along the way, help us make progress. So on Monday, we'll be celebrating Gaura Purnima, the appearance day of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is none other than Lord Krishna. There are many scriptures that speak about Krishna coming in a disguised form as a sannyasi. So the festival on Monday is celebrated as Gaura Purnima, which also happens to be Holi. But for the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, this is a very special day to give us an opportunity to meditate on Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So who is Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? He is Krishna and Radharani in one body. When the Lord concludes the Bhagavad Gita by saying, surrender to me, abandon all other religions, all other rituals, all other dharmas, because the only dharma that matters to us is to surrender to Krishna. And Krishna was so merciful, he was thinking, after he left back to the spiritual world, he was thinking, but I've not told the Jivatmas how to surrender. I just told them surrender and didn't explain anything further. How do you begin the journey of surrender? So Krishna, being very merciful, comes back as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but in the mood of a devotee, the topmost devotee, Srimati Radharani. So much so he takes her color and comes in a golden complexion. And he performs his pastimes as a devotee to show us how do we begin this journey to go back to the spiritual world. How do you begin this journey to surrender to the Supreme Lord? So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was born in Mayapur. In a place called the Navadvipa Dham. It is said that Srimati Radharani created this dham for her pastimes with the Lord. Just as the Lord creates Vrindavan Dham to enjoy his pastimes with Srimati Radharani and the gopis and all the Brajavasis. Similarly, this is Radharani's dham. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared in the year 1486. Interestingly, this Monday is a lunar eclipse, although it's not visible in India. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared on the day of a full moon lunar eclipse. In those days, when it was an eclipse, people would go to take a bath in the Bhagirathi river flowing through the Nadia district. And what would they do as they were taking a bath? They would chant the names of Hari, Hari, Hari. And the Lord inaugurated the Sankirtan movement because he appeared when his names were being chanted. So his father was Jagannath Mishra. His mother's name was Saci Devi. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was a very beautiful child. And the ladies would constantly be at Mother Saci Devi's house. They would find all kinds of excuses to come because the Lord was so beautiful. And it is said when the Lord would cry, the ladies will come over, try to pacify him. The mother would try to pacify him. But the only time the Lord would stop crying is when they chanted, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Then the Lord would stop crying. So this is how the Lord inaugurates the Sankirtan movement. And the Lord performs so many childhood pastimes. For example, one day a Brahmana had come as the guest of Jagannath Mishra, and he wanted to cook bhoga for the Lord and offer it to the Lord. So the first time the Brahmana offered to the Lord and was reciting the mantras, requesting the Lord to please come and honor this bhoga, this little toddler, Nimai, would come and eat the rice. The Brahmana was just shocked. This child came and ate before even the Lord could accept it. So he cooks for the second time. The second time he offers, again, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, as a little infant, came and took that rice again. So the Brahmana tells Jagannath Mishra, how am I going to offer bhoga to the Lord? Your child is constantly interrupting my prayers. So the father says, please forgive us. We'll put our child to sleep in the room. And you do it a little later in the night. So the Brahmana cooks again bhoga for the Lord. The third time, he's meditating on Lord Krishna and requesting the Lord to accept his offerings. Everybody was asleep in the household. Suddenly, out of nowhere, the infant shows up and accepts the rice. And the Brahmana at first was furious, thinking, how did you come out of the locked room? And the little toddler tells the Brahmana, you are offering the bhoga to me. You're calling me every time. I've come and accepted it, and you seem to have a problem with it. First time I accepted, second time I accepted, third time I accepted, and you have a problem. You are offering it to me. You're calling me, I came. What more do you want? The Brahmana was just flabbergasted. At that time, the Lord reveals himself as Krishna and tells the Brahmana, keep it a secret. Don't tell anybody. So then a couple of thieves decide, this child is so attractive. He's dressed so beautifully, such lovely jewelry around his neck. Their objective was to steal the jewelry from the Lord. And how are they going to attract the attention of the Lord? They gave him some bhoga in the form of sweets. And Krishna obviously is going to accept anybody who offers to him. Even without love, he accepted. So they decide to take Chaitanya Mahaprabhu away from the house so that they could deprive him of his jewelry and then somehow return him back. But the Lord, through his Yogamaya potency, deceived the thieves. They went round and round looking for a place until the Lord leads them back to his own house. And the thieves thinking, oh my God, we've taken this child away for so long, we are going to be in trouble. So like this, the Lord performs many pastimes, including one that I remember, where he teases the girls who are worshipping Katyayani for a good husband. And the Lord playfully tells them, you shouldn't worship Katyayani, you should worship me. And the girls were like, what are you talking about? You have to remember the Lord has come as the Gupta avatar. He does not reveal himself. But still, he was teasing the young girl, saying, I know exactly what you're praying for. You're praying for a good husband. You will not get a good husband. You'll get useless, worthless husbands. Why don't you just offer your prayer to me? So there are these pastimes of the Lord, which kind of look very familiar and similar to Krishna's pastimes. So what was the mission and mood of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? That this Yuga Dharma, the Kaliyuga Dharma, is to do Harinam Sankirtan. Just by doing Harinam Sankirtan, one will get completely purified and will have an opportunity to go back to the spiritual world. So the Lord came specifically to inaugurate the Harinam Sankirtan movement. And he encouraged people to do door-to-door knocking and encouraged people to get them to chant the holy names of the Lord. He encouraged his devotees to go out on the streets and do Harinam Sankirtan so that people can hear the names of the Lord. And through hearing, their consciousness will slowly start getting purified. He encouraged everyone to read the Srimad Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita to purify ourselves. He taught that Krishna is the object of love for all the Jivatmas. That Vrindavan Dham is non-different than Sri Krishna. Therefore, the Dham itself is worshipable. Even if Krishna is no longer there, performing his Prakat Leelas. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also taught that the highest form of love exhibited was those of the gopis of Vrindavan. And if you want to understand the Lord, you should really study the Srimad Bhagavatam. And the ultimate goal of all Jivatmas, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, is to get Krishna Prema, pure love for the Supreme Lord. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu predicted that for 10,000 years, his names will be chanted in every city, in every village, in every town, all over this globe. And everybody was wondering, how will this benediction of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu come true? Who will chant the holy names of the Lord across the globe. It was also predicted that one day a senior Senapati Bhakta will come to fulfill the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And we don't need to guess who that person is. That is our founder Acharya, His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta, Srila Prabhupada. So Prabhupada appeared specifically to fulfill the mission set forth by the Lord Himself. See, in history, most of us would have learned about the Bhakti movement and the great saints and sages. But somehow that Bhakti movement dwindled, and somebody had to revive it. And that person selected was Srila Prabhupada. So Prabhupada was born in Kolkata in the year 1896 on September 1st. And at the time of his birth, his father consulted an astrologer to make his astrological chart. And the astrologer tells his father that your child will do something extraordinary. He will be a great devotee of Lord Krishna. He will construct 108 temples. But he will do it at a very advanced age. He'll not be young when he does this. So in Kolkata, in 1922, Srila Prabhupada meets his spiritual master, His Divine Grace Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who was the founder of the Gaudiya Math. By then, Saraswati Prabhupada had established 64 Gaudiya Maths across India. And it was his deep desire to propagate this Krishna consciousness movement all across the globe. So he sent a couple of his disciples to London to see if the preaching movement can begin there. But somehow or the other, they could not succeed, and they came back. Later, in 1933, Prabhupada takes initiation from his spiritual master. And actually, in the very first meeting that Prabhupada had with his guru in 1922, his guru gave him his instructions. He said, "You are a well-educated man. You speak English very well. You should preach in English. You should go to the West and preach in English. And if at all you are able to collect any funds, please print books." Prabhupada fulfilled all three instructions of his spiritual master. Although Prabhupada was just 26 years old when he met his guru, he was already married. He had children. He was a grahastha. Later on, he sets up his own pharmacy. But he was thinking, how is he going to fulfill the mission of his spiritual master? How is he going to follow through on the instructions that he received? So Prabhupada begins to write his commentary on Bhagavad Gita. And in 1944, Prabhupada starts a magazine on his own called Back to Godhead, which is still in publication by ISKCON today. So every fortnight, Prabhupada would write the articles, edit the articles, type the manuscripts, check the proofing, take it to the printer, do the binding, and he would physically walk out on the streets and distribute individual copies. Later on, Prabhupada gives up his married life to become a vanaprastha. So in 1950, Prabhupada moves to Vrindavan and stays in the very, very famous Sri Sri Radha Damodar temple. so that he could study the scriptures and continue his writing. So you can still visit Sri Sri Radha Damodar temple and goes visit the room in which Prabhupada stayed. Very small room, very austere. Prabhupada was absorbed in the instructions of his spiritual master. So Prabhupada had started writing. He also started writing the purports, translations to Srimad Bhagavatam. And as he was in the Radha Damodar temple, he prints 3 volumes of Srimad Bhagavatam, the first 3 cantos. And he was thinking, my spiritual master told me to go to the West. How am I going to go there? Who is going to sponsor my visa? Where am I going to get the funds to go to a far off place? Who is going to listen to my lecture? Who is going to understand this deep philosophy? But Krishna arranges for everything for a sincere devotee. So Krishna arranged for an American woman who was married to an Indian man. Her name was Sally Agarwal. Prabhupada, through some connection, writes her a letter. And she sponsors the visa for Prabhupada. She had never met Prabhupada. She never knew who this person was. She just knew it was an elderly gentleman. And then Prabhupada goes to a very wealthy lady who was running her own company, the Scindia Steamship Company. And he begs her to allow him to travel on the commercial vehicle, ship, that was going to go to Boston. So at the age of 69, Prabhupada boards the ship in 1965 from Kolkata. The name of the ship was Jaladuta. And he lands in Boston with 40 rupees in his pocket, the volumes of Srimad Bhagavatam that he printed, a couple of clothes, that's it. Nothing else. Just one small suitcase which was filled with books and some puffed rice. On the journey of around maybe 38-40 days, Srila Prabhupada suffered 2 heart attacks. And Prabhupada writes in his diary, if I get one more heart attack, I'm going to be dead. And he was telling Krishna, I don't know what your plan is for me, but these are the instructions given to me by my spiritual master. If you wish, you can make it happen. Actually, Prabhupada also composes a beautiful poem on his arriving in the United States. He is expressing his anxiety to the Lord, where he says, you know, this America is the hotbed of materialism. People have no interest in spirituality. They are so lost in darkness. You have sent me here. What am I going to do? How will they understand my speech? How will they understand this philosophy? And Srila Prabhupada concludes his poem by saying, my dear Lord, you make me dance. I'm a puppet in your hands. You do whatever you want with me, but help me fulfill my spiritual master's instructions. And so for the first year, Prabhupada struggled. He didn't have money to pay the rent. So he lives in some other Indian gentleman who was running a yoga studio. Then as Prabhupada continued to write, one day his typewriter, his manuscript, everything was stolen. And Prabhupada had to write all his commentary to the Bhagavad Gita again before he could print it. Then, somehow or the other, someone gave him some money and said, you can go stay in this place that was filled with drug addicts, drunkards. These were all youngsters who were rebelling against their country that was engaged in a useless war in Vietnam. They were drafting young boys, and many, many young men were coming back in a coffin. So there were huge civil rights protests, anti-war protests happening when Prabhupada actually lands in the United States. So these youngsters rejected their government, rejected their parents' ideology. One day Prabhupada thought, how am I going to begin this preaching? So he goes to Tompkins Park and sits down to do Harinam Sankirtan. And soon, many, many youngsters gather around him and begin to sing. Soon thereafter, all these were young boys from the age of 17, 18, and girls up to the age of 22, 23. They all became disciples of Prabhupada. Today, these disciples of Prabhupada are in their 60s and 70s. They simply fell in love with Prabhupada. Prabhupada used to cook for them. Prabhupada used to serve them. Prabhupada used to clean their plates after they finished eating. Prabhupada used to preach. Now Prabhupada is in his 70s, he's 71. He's thinking, I'm getting old. I need some help. And he told Krishna, how long can I be washing dishes and cooking for so many youngsters? Because young people have a huge appetite. And if prasadam is free, as it is today in ISKCON, everybody will come. So the very next day, a couple of youngsters thought to themselves, this old man is doing everything himself. Maybe he needs some help. Let's ask him if he needs help. And Prabhupada was so relieved that Krishna had arranged immediately for these youngsters to come and help him. So he taught them how to make chapati. He taught them how to make dal. He taught them how to make gulab jamun. He taught them how to make Bengali dishes, how to make kachoris. So one by one, Srila Prabhupada spent time with these youngsters, teaching them how to cook bhoga for the Lord, teaching them how to offer the bhoga to the Lord, teaching them how to make beads, teaching them how to chant, teaching them how to read the Bhagavad Gita, teaching them how to print books, how to establish a publishing company. The first Bhagavad Gita was actually published by Macmillan Books. But it was so unfortunate because a publisher always has editorial rights. Prabhupada had written 700 pages of commentary, and they produced his book with just barely 150 pages because they thought if there are that many pages, nobody will buy Prabhupada's book. So Prabhupada was very upset. He said, he called one of his very young disciples, Rameshwar Prabhu, and told him, I want you to set up a book publishing company. And the disciple said, Prabhupada, I know nothing about publishing. I don't know anything about running a business. How am I going to do this? Prabhupada says, Krishna will help you. Then Prabhupada would say, set up a temple there. And they would say, Prabhupada, how are we going to do this? Krishna will help you. Prabhupada said, go to London. And he sent two young couples there. And he said, open a temple and start preaching. They were like, yes, Prabhupada. By now they understood if Prabhupada says Krishna will help you, they were seeing with their eyes everything manifesting whatever Prabhupada wanted. Whatever Prabhupada instructed them was happening. So they had so much faith in Prabhupada. And so from the age of 70 to the age of 81, Prabhupada traveled the globe for 12 times, established 108 temples exactly as the astrologer told his father, and exactly as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had said, my name will be chanted in every town, village, country across this globe. Prabhupada established gurukuls. Then Prabhupada decided, the time has come for my disciples to take over. So Prabhupada comes back to Vrindavan and he leaves his body on November 14th, 1977. So today ISKCON is a worldwide organization. There are millions of devotees chanting the holy names of the Lord. There are millions of devotees who have become Krishna Bhaktas. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, anybody can chant the holy names of the Lord. There is no bar for religion, caste system, age, nothing matters. Anybody can chant the holy names of the Lord and go back to the spiritual world. There is no prerequisite that you have to be a Hindu or whatever it is. So here we are because of Prabhupada. Today, preaching has gone digital. Prabhupada always said, everything must be used in the service of Krishna. Internet should be used in the service of Krishna. Computers should be used in the service of Krishna. Prabhupada used to use a tape recorder to record his translations. And then his disciples would later on transcribe it and then write Prabhupada's purport. Prabhupada always kept himself busy. When his disciples were asleep, he would wake up at 11 or 12 at night, and up to 4 o'clock in the morning, Prabhupada would be writing. This was his daily routine. So Prabhupada would barely sleep for 2-3 hours every night because he was working with a sense of urgency. I must fulfill my spiritual master's instructions. So nobody can imagine that at such an advanced age, somebody will accomplish something so monumental. I have hardly done justice to Srila Prabhupada's life in the last 10 minutes. But you can read about Prabhupada's lifetime. A couple of biographies have been written by his disciples. The one thing that Prabhupada never did, he never gave up. He had faith in his spiritual master's instructions to him. He had faith in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission. So when you have faith and determination, you can accomplish monumental things. Once again, we cannot imitate somebody like Prabhupada. We can tell clearly that he is a pure devotee, that the Lord had personally sent him and given him that power to accomplish this. So that is Srila Prabhupada. So join us on Monday for those of you who are here in Bangalore. My invitation to you to come and join us in Gaura Purnima. For those who are not in Bangalore, please go visit your local temple. Check on the timings. Normally, the Abhishek happens in the evening followed by wonderful Sankirtan, hearing a little bit about Chaitanya Leela, and then, of course, followed by Prasad. So thank you very much for joining us these 9 days. I hope these days were enjoyable for you and as blissful for you as it has been for me.